free information.
For many people, going to the dentist is something to dread, but not necessarily to fear. But for more than 100 families in Florida, they say a dentist's office was a place where their children suffered abuse at the hands of Dr. Howard Schneider. He shut down his practice in 2015 after the accusations surfaced, and boy, wait till you hear what they are. Among the parents' claims, unnecessarily pulling teeth and injuring children by propping their mouths open too wide, causing bleeding. To top it off, prosecutors say Schneider billed patients for procedures they didn't need and billed Medicaid for services on low-income patients he never performed. And it was during that criminal case where medical experts found that the dentist was suffering from dementia, and a judge has ruled he is incompetent to stand trial. And now many of the patients who say their children were harmed by Dr. Schneider may not get the justice they demand. Stacey Newman is a Primetime Justice producer who has been working on this all day. You are an expert on this case. First of all, I just want you to tell people what some of the accusations are of what this dentist did to their children, their little girls, their little boys.
Well, Jean, as you can see, this heartbreaking and actually gut-wrenching video we've been playing of these kids strapped down. They're screaming, they're in pain, they're bleeding. We have these horrible pictures of these kids' mouths swollen with blood. And the parents are calling this a house of horrors and saying that their kids were tortured, that this dentist got off on torturing these little kids, and the parents did not give consent, Jean, to many of these procedures that were done. And that is the point where this case just blew wide open.
Right. Joining us tonight is John Phillips. He is the attorney for alleged victims and victims, because their cases have settled, of Dr. Schneider. Thank you for joining us. First of all, you represent well over 100 victims and alleged victims. And we're talking, this is the civil case now we're talking about. Am I correct? And I think all have settled, but 27 of them. Are you concerned? Yeah, go ahead.
104 have settled, 27 are still open. And to anticipate your case, we're very concerned about a lot of this.
Okay. The 27, are you concerned that those families will not be able to settle?
We're going to go after the practice as well. So to the extent the practice basically employed someone with dementia, we don't know when this dementia allegedly started. Clearly, there's examples of him doing x-rays 3 and 4 times and doing the wrong teeth, and a child going in for 1 tooth and coming out with 8 teeth missing.
But I would think it would be your case to show an intent there, an intent to do that so he could bill Medicaid, because the criminal case is Medicaid fraud. Now, here's what I want to know. Is it true that he took out 7 teeth from one young person when he was only supposed to take out 1 tooth?
Not just one, Gene, several. That happened several times where there was 1 tooth that there was informed consent to remove or work on, and he'd take out 6, 7, 8 and bill taxpayers through Medicaid for all of them.
Well, here's what I don't get. This happened between 2013 and 2015. How did he still have his license to practice dentistry?
He was one of the few Medicaid dentists, and in fact, he was the only one to perform these procedures on special needs children. And so the state almost adopted him as the go-to expert, and complaints were generally ignored. And bear in mind, there are victims of 10, 20 years ago, even as much as 30 years ago, who say the same thing. He just always got the benefit of the doubt.
So complaints were ignored by who?
By the dental board. To some extent, the police were called. There's all sorts of police call-outs, I think 30 within the last 5 years, where things would get escalated. A lot of the time, he would prohibit families from going back, and these children were either special needs or so young that they really couldn't communicate, which added to the problem.
So there is a criminal case that now has been stayed because he's incompetent to stand trial, and that's based on criminal fraud, Medicaid, as we talked about, putting things down he didn't do or doing things he didn't have to do to be able to bill Medicaid. What about a criminal abuse claim I mean, why hasn't there been a criminal investigation that has resulted in criminal charges? Is there another side to the story here I'm not seeing?
No, the abuse is an intent act. The Medicaid fraud, they basically were doing a roundabout. They were using the abuse and using the unnecessary procedures to go, according to the Medicaid fraud statutes, to essentially charge them with something that they didn't have to prove the standard of abuse. So they were doing one and the same thing. Either way, now with the finding of incompetency, it kind of doesn't matter. The criminal cases are pending with him with a dementia diagnosis based upon the findings of 3 experts. And so we're all kind of sitting here, dementia doesn't cure itself. So we're all kind of sitting here wondering if he's ever going to stand trial or face the criminal justice or even civil justice systems.
All right, joining us tonight is Dr. Sam Sulla. He is a cosmetic dentist. He joins me from Los Angeles. What's your take on all of this?
Well, it's obviously very upsetting to hear what's gone on under this particular doctor's care. Clearly, a lot of things were done that shouldn't have been done. I think both as a healthcare professional myself and also a father, there's a lot of things that we can learn from what's happened here. As a healthcare professional, obviously the care of our patients comes first and is the most paramount importance for any physician. So clearly the allegations are totally uncalled for, and there is no justification for what happened. But I think also as parents, we need to be more aware, more educated, and ask more questions. I don't think that one should just look at a doctor in a white coat and immediately assume that everything is going to be taken care of.
Dr. Sulla, I think you're right, because you sure weren't protected by the system. John, I got to ask you, this happened for 2 years, and the system, I mean, is this politics in play that the dentistry board just didn't sort of see it, and the police sort of came in, but that was it?
I'm glad you asked that, because when the attorney was talking, I said to myself, I'm mad at the state. Why can't we go after the state for some liability? When you have a dentist that you basically adopt as the go-to for people who are on public assistance, and nobody checks in, and all the complaints to the dental board go unanswered, that to me makes no sense. And I know in this case, I also agree with the attorney that the criminal charges are probably pale in comparison to the civil case, because that's where the victims are going to get monetary relief, not so much in the criminal court. And they'll never see a criminal trial now because dementia doesn't get better.
So, Danny, I hate to say this, I have to wonder if he has dementia.
Well, it's good defensive lawyering to at least try to get that dementia, and a court apparently believed it. And the problem for the plaintiff's attorney, and I'd be interested to know, the problem for the plaintiff's attorney now might be the insurance adjusters, whoever's writing the checks for all those other settlements that have happened. Will they view this declaration of incompetency as sort of an increase in their bargaining position and say, maybe we won't settle as much with these remaining cases. Maybe we'll hold out and wait and see what happens with the criminal case.
John Phillips, are you concerned about that? And why didn't you bring this as a class action?
We couldn't bring it as a class action because the nature and number of the procedures were very different. And Florida law basically prohibited it. As for the other question, it is a concern, but the other side of the coin is the business enterprise, the Inc. that's at fault here. Certainly they kept Dr. Schneider employed. He was self-employed, but they kept him employed despite notice that he was doing these acts. And we're framing it as a count of negligence plus gross negligence. And
unbelievable.
They should have gotten rid of him sooner. And it's a real mess. And our hearts go out to these parents. They don't understand.
You've got victims here. You've got victims, alleged victims, and good luck to you. Thank you so much for watching tonight. I'm Jean Casares. We're going to see you back here tomorrow night at 8 o'clock for Primetime Justice. Up next, how it really happened with Hill Harper, the Anna Nicole Smith story. Good night, everybody.